You're walking your best friend, zoning out about work for a few minutes, and when you look back down, there it goes again. You've lost count of how many times this week they've buried their face in the grass, chomping away like an actual cow. You start to wonder, is this really what's left of their wolf ancestry? So you get home and Google it just to be sure, and the explanations you find sound reasonable enough, but read a little closer and they're pretty flimsy, nothing solid enough to actually put your mind at ease. So let's sit down and trace the real scientific clues behind this seemingly harmless behavior. Before we dive in, hitting subscribe would be the best little cheer you could send our way. As for the like button, I'm betting you'll be generous with it once you've made it to the end. Let's get into it. 1. Descendants of wolves? Let's start with the dog's closest relative, the wolf. If you used to think wolves only ate meat, like I once did, here's a surprise: there's evidence that wolves eat grass too. A study in central Greece analyzed over 100 wolf scat samples and found grass showed up in about 1/5 of them. But don't get too excited for your pup just yet, because a wolf's diet is still made up mostly of wild hoofed animals, in some areas accounting for over 96% of the diet's biomass. Grass, in other words, is just a side dish, not the main course. But here's the key point. Chewing and swallowing grass is a completely different thing from actually digesting it. Cows have a 4-chambered stomach and a specialized rumination process built to break down cellulose, the tough stuff that makes up the green in grass. Interesting, sure, but I'm willing to bet you don't want to watch your dog burp up lunch and chew it all over again like that. Lucky for us, dogs didn't evolve down that path. Studies on canine digestion describe dogs as facultative carnivores. They have a relatively short digestive tract, but they're actually pretty good at digesting starch thanks to the amylase enzyme produced by the pancreas. What they're missing is a specialized gut microbiome built to break down cellulose, the way cows or horses have. Put simply, a dog chews the grass, swallows it, absorbs a small portion of the easily digestible parts, and the rest of the cellulose just passes straight through the gut, barely processed at all. Their teeth tell a similar story. Aside from a few small differences from wolves, dogs have held onto a predator's dental setup: sharp canine teeth, molars built for tearing meat, not for grinding down plant fiber. So what about that classic line we've all heard? Dogs eat grass because they're sick, to make themselves throw up? Is that actually true, or just something we've assumed all along? 2. What does the science say? Turns out, not really. In a survey by Karen Sueda and colleagues covering 1,571 dog owners, 92% said their dogs rarely showed signs of feeling unwell before or after eating grass, and throwing up right afterward wasn't nearly as common as most people assume. In other words, for the vast majority of dogs, eating grass didn't show up as some sick body's cry for help. And here's the bigger picture. This same survey found that as many as 68% of dogs ate plants daily or weekly. With grass topping the list, 79% of owners confirmed it as the thing their dogs munched on most often. So no, this isn't some rare, alarming red flag. It's just Tuesday for most dogs. That said, that doesn't mean dogs never eat grass when their stomach's off. But it points to a principle worth remembering when reading a dog's behavior. A single action rarely tells the whole story. You need to look at frequency, context, and everything happening before and after that behavior. To put the upset stomach means grass eating theory to the test directly, Samantha McKenzie and colleagues tracked 12 beagles through 2 phases, first on a normal diet, then switched to a diet designed to cause mild digestive upset. They then logged the details of each dog's grass-eating behavior and how often they threw up. If the old folk theory held up, an upset stomach should have made the dogs eat more grass to self-medicate. But the results actually went in the opposite direction. The dogs ate less grass when their stomachs were upset. So the claim that dogs eat grass to cure a stomachache is oversimplifying something that's actually a lot more complicated. Samantha McKenzie later went on to conduct a more extensive doctoral thesis, tracking 99 dogs across nearly 2,800 recorded grass-eating events over more than 1,400 minutes of observation. There was no evidence that they ate grass to self-treat intestinal worms, and the vomiting rate after eating grass was far too low to support the theory that grass eating is meant to induce vomiting. But the thesis did reveal a much more interesting clue. Dogs were less likely to eat grass right after being fed and ate more of it the longer it had been since their last meal. From this, the author raised a possibility. Maybe, for some dogs, grass functions more like a snack than a natural remedy. This is still just a hypothesis, not a final conclusion. But it's exactly that clear distinction between the data shows this and this could be explained by that makes Four Paws Mind a channel that respects the truth over guesswork. 3. Grass isn't dangerous unless… Here's something owners often overlook. Sometimes the issue isn't the grass itself, but where that grass is growing. A research team at Purdue University ran a pretty even-handed experiment. They measured how much weed-killing chemicals like 2,4-D, MCPP, and dicamba lingered on treated lawns, while also testing for these chemicals in the urine of dogs living in households that used them. The results caught a lot of people off guard. These chemicals showed up in dog urine at quite a few households, even before the lawn was treated, and even at some households that never used the chemicals at all, suggesting the chemicals can travel over from nearby areas. On the grass itself, chemical residue can stick around for hours, sometimes even for a few days after spraying. This doesn't mean one bite of grass will instantly poison your dog. It doesn't mean every public lawn out there is some dangerous trap either. But it does give us a more practical question to carry with us on every walk. If your dog loves eating grass, instead of just asking, why do they want to eat it, ask one more question. Where are they eating it? A lawn in your own backyard, where you know the full care history, is one thing. A public lawn where you have no idea what was just sprayed or when is a completely different story. 4. So what actually matters? Next time your dog dips their head down to eat grass, don't rush to pull the leash, and don't jump to conclusions that they're sick. Take a few seconds and really watch. Did they just eat, or are they hungry? Are they grabbing a few blades and moving on, or relentlessly hunting for more? Does their body seem relaxed, and are they still happily trotting along afterward? Any signs of vomiting, diarrhea, or unusual lethargy? And most importantly, is where they're eating somewhere you trust is safe, or an area that might have just been treated with chemicals? But to understand what one specific dog is telling you, sometimes what you need is something no study can replace: observation and the bond between the two of you. That's what it really means to read a dog's behavior, instead of just slapping a label on it out of reflex. Right now, science still doesn't have one single answer for why dogs eat grass. But at the very least, here's what we do know for sure. This behavior is extremely common, rarely tied to illness or vomiting, poorly explained by the eating grass to throw up idea, and likely has more to do with how dogs seek out and interact with the plants around them. There are still open questions, and that's not a weakness of science. That's actually the most interesting part of it. Maybe the biggest takeaway here isn't let your dog eat grass or never let your dog eat grass. It's this: don't turn a behavior into a diagnosis just because we've heard that explanation so many times we've started treating it as fact. So, what's really going on in a dog's mind when they eat grass? It could be an instinctive habit left over from their wild ancestors. It could simply be that they just like it, the same way you sometimes crave something for no particular reason at all. Science hasn't given us a final answer yet, and maybe that's not something to worry about. What's more worth paying attention to is this: as long as that grass hasn't just been sprayed with pesticide or weed killer, letting them eat it is perfectly fine. And what might be even more worth paying attention to is what's going on in your dog's mind the moment you yank the leash and pull them away right in the middle of their exploring. And we actually have a video that gets into exactly that, right here. Let's check it out. So there you have it. Dogs are still dogs, descendants of wolves, and even though they've evolved to handle more starch in their diet, they're still nowhere close to cow territory, and eating grass isn't some way of self-medicating or inducing vomiting like a lot of people assume. Here at Four Paws Mind, we can't promise we'll always have the exact answer to every strange thing your dog does, but we do promise to stick to what's backed by science and to only tell you the truth. Because as you can probably tell, science hasn't figured out everything just yet, right? And that's exactly what makes this so much fun to keep digging into and exploring. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and share so this kind of real, fact-checked information can spread further, instead of all the emotional guesswork floating around out there. See you in the next video.